All might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they ought. Samuel Adams was right, but do we value it enough? Freedom does not come with good intentions, and it will never survive on luck alone. It's about government being so tightly checked and controlled that even the smallest unconstitutional step is met immediately with resistance. Not later, right now, to crush tyranny at the start. That's the difference between real freedom and servitude, basically, with nicer packaging. So today, we're going to unpack what it really means to be a free people according to the founders and the old revolutionaries, with insights from people like Adams, Jefferson, Dickinson, Tucker, and more. This is the path to liberty, so let's dive in. But I guess first of all, I should say welcome, and thank you for joining me here today. My name is Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the show for Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. So what does it mean to be a free people? Not just in theory, not on paper, not on parchment, but in practice, day to day. At the height of the American Revolution, John Dickinson, the penman of the Revolution, asked this essential question. For who are a free people, he asked. Not those, he wrote, over whom government is reasonable and equitably exercised, but those who live under a government so constitutionally checked and controlled that proper provision is made against it being otherwise exercised. TLDR. The short version is, if government has a ton of power to violate your rights, and they just choose not to use that power, well, you're not really free. You're living in a state of luck, at best. Only when they try to violate your rights, violate their constitution, the constitution given to them, and they can't get away with it, that's what freedom is all about to the founding generation. That's the test. Not whether politicians sound good or if they mean well, but whether they're stopped dead in their tracks as soon as they try to violate the rules given to them. Now, back in 1723, John Trenchard of Cato's Letters, writing in letter number 115, he spelled it out with no apology. He said, only the checks put upon magistrates make nations free, and only the want or the lack of such checks makes them slaves. And from there, he made the line even clearer. It all comes down to who sets the rules, because if government sets the rules for government, government will never have any limit to the powers that it gives itself. He said they are free where their magistrates are confined within certain bounds set them by the people, and act by rules prescribed them by the people. And they are slaves where their magistrates choose their own rules and follow their lust and humors. If you're like me, anytime I do one of these episodes, you're always thinking, sure sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, let's move forward to 1748 and the celebrated Montesquieu, as James Madison referred to him. Well, he laid out the blueprint in the spirit of laws. He said, to prevent this abuse, it is necessary from the very nature of things that power should be a check to power. But let's get one more thing straight here. The core problem isn't necessarily government itself. It really gets down to human nature and the nature of power. And that's how Thomas Gordon put it in Cato's Letters, number 33 in 1721. He wrote, considering what sort of a creature man is, it is scarce possible to put him under too many restraints when he is possessed of great power. So the more power that he has, the more you have to have limitations on his power. It's better to have him have way less power, of course. But Gordon continued, he may possibly use it well, but they act most prudently who, supposing that he would use it ill, enclose him within certain bounds and make it terrible to him to exceed them. So you always have to start out with the assumption that those in power will always try to expand their power. We all know the old phrase, power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely, but it's not just about the corruption, although exercising power is not delegated. Usurpation of power is a form of corruption, but we also have to understand that power always seeks to expand, and anyone who has it will always try to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So you not only have to give them very clear and strict limits, but you have to make it terrible to exceed those limits. Now, keep in mind that putting those limits on paper, that's one part of the equation. And a lot of people seem to think like, oh, we just need to, fix the words on paper or get the right words on paper and everything will be better. We stayed with previous words on paper and things would have been way better. But the founding generation repeatedly warned us about relying on what they called parchment barriers. That's what James Madison specifically called it in Federalist number 48. They warned us that constitutions, words on paper, don't enforce themselves. They never did, and they never will. Here's how Roger Sherman explained it. He said, "No Bill of Rights ever yet bound the supreme power longer than the honeymoon of a new married couple, unless the rulers were interested in preserving the rights." So if it's not in their interest, if they can get away with doing stuff that violates rights, we all understand that they're going to get away with doing whatever they want to get away with. They don't care. And Sherman was absolutely right. Paper does not bind people with power. But Gordon took it even further. Here again from Cato's letter number 33, you have to make it a bad choice for them to violate the Constitution. He said the only security which we can have that men will be honest is to make it in their interest to be honest. And the best defense which we can have against their being knaves is to make it terrible to them to be knaves. As there are many men wicked in some situations who would be innocent in others, the best way is to make wickedness unsafe in any station. And you can just let your mind roll with that one, but it sure says a lot. And now, since government, of course, from this foundation, from the constitutional foundation, from the principles of the American Revolution, is merely an agent of the people instead of the other way around. The other way around is the system that the founders, the old revolutionaries, fought a long, bloody war to secede from. So government was established just to be an agent of the people of the several states. Well, in that situation, here's Jean-Jacques Burlamaqui, who we can probably say was the prime influence behind the phrase pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence. He explained that it's ultimately the people themselves then in that scenario who decide when and if government violated the rules given to government. He said it certainly belongs to those who have given any person a power which he had not of himself, to judge whether he uses it agreeably to the end for which it was conferred on him. So again, the judge on whether or not the Constitution has been violated is not the agent. Government doesn't get to decide if government violated the rules given to government by the people of the several states. That's the opposite of how things are supposed to be. And this is just what John Locke had said many decades earlier than Burlamaqui did. Here he is in his two treatises. I think it was first published in 1689-ish. He said, "Who shall be judge whether the prince or legislative act contrary to their trust?" He said, "To this I reply, the people shall be judge. Or who shall be judge whether his trustee or deputy acts well, and according to the trust reposed in him, but he who deputes him." So again, the people are the fountain of all power, government is merely their agent, and it's up to the people to determine if government is within the bounds of what the people have delegated to government, and for us, that's in the various constitutions. And again, since government is merely an agent of the people aren't just the judges of whether government violated the rules given to government. Mercy Otis Warren reminded us that they're the ones to keep government in check. She wrote, "The origin of all power is in the people, and they have an incontestable right to check the creatures of their own creation. So again, this is one of the foundational principles of the American Revolution, and that's Mercy Otis Warren writing about it during the ratification debates over the Constitution. And Samuel Adams, he didn't think it was just a right. He considered it a duty to keep government in check, for the people to defend their own liberty and their own Constitution, whether the government likes it or not. He said the liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution, are worth defending at all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks. Now back to John Dickinson, he later explained that whenever you get what he called a bad administration, because he said a good constitution promotes but doesn't always produce a good administration. Here he is writing in support of ratification of the Constitution under the pen name Fabius in 1788, but he was also probably the father of the Articles of Confederation, the lead drafter of the Articles of Confederation. So he was really well versed on how all these things play out. So he said, it doesn't matter how good of a constitution you get, you're eventually going to have a bad administration. He said, well, what happens when that comes up? He said, well, the answer is to be found instantly, and in his words, before the supreme sovereignty of the people. Again, the solution to a bad administration is the supreme sovereignty or final authority of the people themselves, because government is just an agent of the people. He said it is their duty to watch and their right to take care that the Constitution be preserved, or in the Roman phrase on perilous occasions, to provide that the republic receive no damage. And that's ultimately the real line in the sand. Liberty, being a free people, isn't about what they do or don't do as much as it's about what they're allowed to do, or whether or not they can get away with doing things that they're not supposed to do. That's why Thomas Jefferson didn't tell us to hope for or beg for wise and loving rulers. He told us to shackle them. Here he is in his Kentucky Resolutions of 1798. In questions of power, then, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. Now, of course, you got to ask the question, how do you get that done? I'll tell you, first of all, it's not about trying to get words on paper to magically do what they've never done in history, what they will never do in the future, and that is enforce themselves. It's also not about begging government to stop doing what government was never authorized to do in the first place. That's a population on its knees begging for scraps. Instead, it's the duty of the people to protect and defend their own constitution, whether the government likes it or not. And as James Iredell, one of the first associate justices of the Supreme Court, made it clear, this is the only way to get it done. He said the only resource against usurpation is the inherent right of the people to prevent its exercise. And man, there is so much to unpack in just that one short statement. But here's a few important points. First of all, it's not something to try later on. It's not something to try after everything else fails. It's the only resource. The only resource against usurpation. Usurpation is an exercise of power not authorized by the Constitution. Basically, stealing power, theft of power from the sovereign people of the several states. So the only way to deal with unconstitutional acts is the inherent right of the people. In other words, it doesn't need to be written down anywhere. The people don't need permission from constitutions or from government because they're the top of the food chain. And it's their inherent natural right to prevent a violation of the rules that they have given to their agent. So the only resource against usurpation is the inherent right of the people to prevent its exercise. I covered this in much more detail, and I think one of my most important episodes ever, which I did a couple of months ago, how the founders explained this actual and unwritten enforcement mechanism for the Constitution. How to enforce the Constitution, whether the government likes it or not, that'll be linked to in the show notes. We publish a blog post a couple of hours after the live stream is done over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. It's all spelled out. Alan Mosley will get that organized, and in it you're going to find a show links section where it includes all the stuff that I'm mentioning, all the reference links and source documents that I'm referencing in this show. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. But that brings us back full circle to the brutal truth. Even if government doesn't abuse their power, as long as they have the power to abuse you, to violate your liberty, you're not actually free. At best, you're just lucky. St. George Tucker, in View of the Constitution of the United States, he put it like this: it is the due restraint and not the moderation of rulers that constitutes a state of liberty, as the power to oppress, though never exercised, does a state of slavery. And as Jean-Louis Delhomme made clear writing about the British system in 1771, but we can apply it to really any government system, he said, this state of liberty requires action by the people, by individuals. But it is here to be remembered, he said, that those powers of the people which are reserved as a check upon the sovereign can only be effectual so far as they are brought into action by private individuals. For those of you who've read Human Action, that type of mentality probably sounds familiar, but here's the hard truth that almost no one wants to talk about, that almost no one wants you to hear. There is no land of the free. It doesn't exist. You don't have freedom just because politicians behave well, and let's be honest, they almost never do. As the founders taught us, you're only free when the government people can't get away with anything. And that requires a people who are willing to support and defend their own constitution and their own liberty, whether the government likes it or not. Samuel Adams may have put it best when he wrote, "All might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they ought." As usual, it should be no surprise that the government-run, government-approved education system never teaches us any of this stuff. These are absolutely timeless principles that almost no one ever learns. And that's a big part of why we work so hard every single day here at the 10th Amendment Center to reach and teach more and more people about these views, about this important but forgotten and totally ignored history from the founders, from the old revolutionaries, and from the people that they read and learned from. And nothing helps us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. If you got a couple of bucks of that dirty government fiat that they keep devaluing day in and day out, please consider throwing it our way over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. It's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Our membership program starts out at just $2 a month. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options. I'd be very grateful for any consideration you can give to joining us today. Or if you don't want to become a member, that's totally cool, but you still want to help out, that's totally cool as well. Or if you already are a member and you want to pitch in extra, I can't thank you enough. I just want to make sure, no pressure, I want to make sure that you have the proper URL to do that. If you want to do that, it's 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate. And there are also a number of free and easy peasy things that you can do to help us spread the word, primarily by triggering the algorithms of the mainstream platforms, like watch time percentage on YouTube. The more you go beyond 100% watch time, the better it will do. Also, reviews on Apple Podcasts, comments, subscribe, get notifications, hit the like button, all the stuff that you can do to interact with the various platforms, including sharing links and the like. Helps out a great deal. I really, really appreciate your help and support. It's getting us to reach a lot more people than I ever thought possible with this really deep, essential historical information. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it made you think. And more important than anything, I hope you learned something. Again, thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. I look forward to seeing you next time here on the Path to Liberty.